Seuraavaksi meille esiintyy Janika Raun, tutkija tohtori Tarton yliopistosta Virosta. Ja Janika on tehnyt Ruralia-Instituutille tutkimusta MOPA-hankkeessa. MOPA tarkoittaa monipaikkaisen asumisen rytmit, paikat ja asiakasryhmät. Ja sähkönkäyttö, data monipaikkaisen asumisen analysoimisessa on Janikan aiheena. Tänään hän esittelee niitä tuloksia. Esitys on englanniksi. Next presentation will be delivered in English by Janika Raun, a doctor at the University of Tartu, Estonia. And Janika will talk about analyzing multi-local living using electricity consumption data. We will hear about the results of the MOPA project. Tere hommikust, Janika. Tere tulemasta tänne. The stage is yours.
Huomenta, hyvät seminaarin osallistujat. Minä olen Janika Raun. Unfortunately, I do not speak Finnish that well, so I will give my presentation here today in English. But the more happier I am actually to be here amongst you to present the results of the work that I have been doing for the past year now. So you might have the question, who am I and why I'm here? It was already shortly said, but just to go over it once more. So I am a geographer by origin from Estonia. Wow, magic happened. And yeah, as I said, I'm a geographer and I come from the University of Tartu, where I did my bachelor, master, and also my PhD studies there. I was working at the research lab called Mobility Lab. So this is a research group that mostly uses all kinds of different mobile data to understand how humans move in space. So different kinds of mobilities. And in my PhD studies, I was focusing on tourists and how do they move inside Estonia using mobile positioning data. So this was 2 years ago in June. Last year in June, I had the opportunity to start working as a postdoctoral researcher or tutkija tohtori for the Ruralia-Instituutti. And this position is actually, let's say, in collaboration inside the University of Helsinki as well, as this is a collaboration between Ruralia-Instituutti and the Digital Geography Lab, where I'm also based at. And now, here I am this year, June, talking to you a bit about the things that I have now found out and of which I have been thinking a lot recently. So some brief words about the project that was already mentioned. So actually the project started already March last year and it's going to end in October this year, financed by Etelä-Savan Maakundaliitto. And this project became possible thanks to a really good cooperation that is ongoing between the Ruralia-Instituutti and the electricity company Suur-Savan Sähkö. So thanks to that, we got the data and the necessary information to actually carry out the project. And the aim was to use the electricity consumption data to actually understand when are the second homes used and which are the main user groups there. And yeah, as said, this is also a good collaboration inside the University of Helsinki as well. So you people here are already aware of the fact that second homes are increasing in Finland, but it's still good to go over the numbers from time to time again and then see that there are more than 500,000 free time properties in the Statistics Finland database, and this number is increasing. And of course, as already talked quite a lot, this is due to the The pandemic we have witnessed throughout the past 2 years, but actually the increase was there already before. So what are the actual, let's say, or this is not only the case in Finland, but we can see that these kind of trends are happening throughout the world. So from Australia to America and in different European countries in between. So that more people are looking for these, let's say, more sparsely populated places where they could feel safe and be socially distant to other people. But actually what I would like to maybe emphasize is that during now these past months, also here in Finland and then on the other side of the Finnish Gulf or around the Baltic Sea in general, there is actually already signs of, let's say, a bit cooling down. So not so many properties sold anymore. So we'll see how this goes. Of course, it's still increasing, but the increase is not so fast anymore. So we are, let's say, witnessing the changes in that. So we might ask, like, what are the reasons behind it? Of course, as already briefly mentioned by Manu in the earlier presentation as well, the reason behind is that actually we are living in an age of information and communication technologies that enable us to be flexible. So as we are here today, also greetings to all the participants up there in Microsoft Teams. Thanks to all these kind of possibilities, it is actually possible to choose where to be and where to conduct everyday work tasks. And when looking statistics in this regard, then again, Finland pops out as one of the countries where remote work or doing work from home is actually really widespread. So here in the darker green color, it's the year 2020, and the lighter green one is the 2019. So basically the share of people who are usually doing their work from home. So this already increased from 2019 to 2020. So now every fifth person is basically doing their work from home in Finland. But if we now consider that actually this figure is based on a survey where people answer that they usually do work, but when we include all those people who sometimes, let's say for 1 day a week or something, do their work from home, then this share is actually much higher, reaching up to 30 or 40% even. So this is definitely something that is paving the way for these multi-local practices that we are talking about here today. And these practices are not only bound to the country borders. We can also witness these multi-local patterns also within different regions and also within different countries. So I, for example, know myself several families who work here, live here in Finland, but still have their second home or cottage in Estonia, for example. So this is the case, or this is the connected world that we are currently living in. And I would like to emphasize or use the statement by a well-known tourism and second home scholar from Sweden, Dieter Müller, who have actually said that we people who are interested in second homes and second home research are like forerunners in this field, because as the society is changing so rapidly, then we are the ones who are actually in the center point to understand how these changes are going on. And as quite many or most of the scientific discussions are really static or stationary, so including this mobility aspect into it and looking it from this multi-local perspective is definitely giving us new ideas and new perspectives how to move on. And as already said, the traditional view is really static one. So far, as I have also shown you some graphs already so far, these are based on really traditional data sources. We have registers here in the Nordic countries. The registers are really good. They give us valuable information. When we want to know more, then we carry out surveys. This is also good to get some real information about the why questions and what questions, that why and why people are visiting and what they're actually doing. But these kind of methods have, of course, their limitations. All these registers are always retrospective. They are not updated every day or every week or not even every month. So they are not so up to date all the time. Of course, they represent aggregated information. And when we are talking about surveys, then they are always bound with small samples that again makes them somehow limited in time and space, that makes them time consuming and costly. So this recent decade especially has, let's say, put us researchers into a position where we have to find out other possible ways how to get information about these, let's say, these changing mobilities that I have been talking about. So, but as we are living in this ICT-based world, there are possibilities for us second home researchers to do this. So what we are actually interested in is really simple. We want to know how people move and behave in their everyday activity space. So basically how they go to school, they take their kids to the kindergarten, how they, let's say, carry out everyday activities. And in that everyday space, having a summer cottage somewhere is also a really common thing. So if we are not using surveys or registers, then now in this digital age, we actually make the data ourselves. So by carrying out our everyday activities, validating transport cards, paying with credit cards, calling to our friends, posting fancy food pictures to Instagram, or commenting about the war in Ukraine in Twitter, then all this actually leave behind a digital trace that is somewhere, so in some servers, in some super cloud computers that could actually be used for the benefit of society. I have divided these all different digital data sources into 4 broad categories. And today I'm mostly focusing on the mobile phone data and the electricity data, but to shortly introduce the others as well, so that in our smartphones we have all kinds of different applications, either navigation apps or TripAdvisor or calling a taxi or so on, that are actually also collecting all kinds of different information. And again, there are companies who are buying this kind of information, and then they again are selling it, for example, to researchers or to other companies who are interested in this kind of data. So this is a so-called smartphone-based data that is then provided in some aggregated way. But we as people ourselves create data quite a lot, as said. When we, for example, make a tweet or post something in Instagram, then again, this data is being made. This is also called user-generated data. And this can be also used to understand actually the movement of people, because quite often these data sets have spatial location information also behind it. So, and for that, for example, Twitter has a really easy access for researchers as well to actually use this kind of information. And now to the mobile phone data that is actually collected by the mobile network operators, again in an aggregated manner. But this again can be used to really have a really broad overview about the whole society. And again, in our homes, in our apartments, in our houses, different kinds of metrics or smart meters have been installed, so that are checking how much water we consume or how much electricity we consume. And again, this data is actually somewhere available that could be used for the benefit of society. So just bringing you now some examples how these data sources could be used in second home research and how they could benefit us in this field. So as said, mobile phone data comes from the mobile network operators. And I will bring you examples from one study that was actually published already last year, and some of you might already know it, but this was done by my colleagues at the Digital Geography Lab, who used then data from Telia, Crowd Insights, and Elisa to understand how people moved during the COVID outbreak. So this data is based on basically the mobile network antennas, because every time we use our phone is connected to the antennas, and based on the location of the antenna, we can interpolate the location of people as well. And also when we are having it long term, then we can also detect the origin destination flows from it. And what they did is actually took an ordinary week from February and then compared it to the day in the end of March when there was this Uusimaa lockdown, and they compared whether the presence of people had changed or not. So it turned out that the presence of people increased in several rural municipalities that are also well known as second home mobility municipalities, for example, Puumala or Kustavi. So where there were much more people compared to an ordinary week in February. And when this change in presence was again correlated to the number of free time residencies in these municipalities, then a strong correlation appeared that the more free time residencies the municipality has, the higher were the presence values there as well. So in this correlation analysis, Ahvenamaa municipalities were excluded because these are affected by the ferry route and ferry passengers there, but in general, all the other places, the correlation was really strong. So again, a proof that this information from mobile network operators can provide us this kind of presence information. And we can also look at the catchment areas of different municipalities. So from mobile phone data, we can analyze where the people are coming from. So for example, in the case of Puumala, it has quite a big catchment area where people are coming from, but of course still the majority of people comes from the neighboring municipalities and Uusimaa region, and a bit more or less from other areas. So these are the possibilities that the mobile phone data can give us. It can give us really good spatial location and really good time information. So when are actually people on the move? On to electricity data, as mentioned, the use of this data became possible thanks to a really good collaboration between the Ruralia-Instituutti and the Suur-Savansähkö company, who is the electricity provider here in this region, having more than 100,000 customers with a coverage area basically representing the region of South-Savo. So this is a really good source and a really good collaboration. And maybe again, zooming out a bit to, let's say, remind ourselves that as already been discussed here today as well, that South-Savo is a really good example to actually study this kind of phenomena, as it is amongst the top 3 region in Finland by the number of free time residencies according to Statistics Finland database. And when we look spatially where these free time residencies are located, then again, we are reassuring the results from the mobile phone data analysis that Puumala municipality being number 1 also correlates to official statistics, followed by other well-known summer cottage areas here in Mäntyharju and Hirvensalmi and Rantasalmi and so on. So in the database itself, we got access via ClickSense environment, but in the the database itself, actually the users in the database are already grouped into different categories. And in our analysis, we are already using the data from the category of free-time residencies, so these vabana ajan asunnad. And we have the data from 7 years, from 2015 until 2021, and approximately in the database there is 28,000 free-time properties, and there is also an increase visible throughout the 7 years, so approximately 500 more now. And as there are also news that actually this, let's say, more electricity, there is a need for more network, then we'll most probably see a higher increase in the late next years as well. So what we also did for the first, to understand whether or how good the data actually is, we did a simple correlation analysis to understand whether this information from the electricity company database correlates with the Statistics Finland data. And again, we have a really good correlation up to 0.8 or even 7.9. So this means that we can use this data. It's reliable, representable to actually say something about free-time residencies here in South Savo region. And what this data actually is about, it's about monthly consumption values per property. And we have the spatial information on municipality or postal code level as well. But in the database itself, there are, even though they are all clustered or categorized in the database as already free-time residences, we can see different kind of usage patterns there, either really heavy users throughout the years or those who are coming only in the summer months. So it's a really diverse group, actually. And there were also several technical details that had to be solved in the beginning. So we are using raw values instead of temperature correction, so because this works better for detecting this presence of second home users. And we're using median values instead of mean, because mean is really affected by some high consumers, like, for example, big tourist farms and so on. So first of all, when just looking at the median consumption values throughout these 7 years, we can see for the first 5 years a really, let's say, simple seasonal pattern. So the higher consumption values during the summer months and lower consumption during winter months. And we can also see like almost like a camel curve, or there's a peak also in October, where there is the, let's say, the holiday or school holiday as well, so more people being present. But then we can clearly, let's say, divide this 7-year time period into two, that since March 2020, this clear and simple, beautiful pattern actually changed. And we can see much higher consumption values now during the spring months in 2020 and also in 2021. And we can see that the consumption values for winter months did not drop so much anymore, which is again a good indication or a sign that actually more people are being present here. Just to have a bit easier comparison, the green line here is the average median consumption for the first 5 years, and then with the purple line we have the 2020, and with the yellow line we have the 2021. So again, in summer months there is actually not anything, no big difference, but the difference is happening, let's say, in the shoulder season, so in the spring months and in the autumn months, where there are more consumption now during the past 2 years than there have been previously. So again, an indication of being present. And we can look for these differences in different spatial areas. For example, taking Mikkeli itself really clearly has the similar pattern as the whole area, so higher values during spring and autumn, and not not so much differences actually during the real summer months. But this is just the median consumption. So we would like to actually know when people are present. So the idea is that we would like to detect the occupancy from the electricity data. So there are different options how to do it. There are really simple binary measures. So if there is no consumption, we can pretty much clearly state that no people were present, but this is, let's say, a really, really simple solution. We can also set the threshold a bit higher so that these really small and minimal consumptions will be left out. But still, it did not work well because there are still some, let's say, abnormally low months that are not actually detected as not occupied using this method. So instead, we used the whole period we had, the 7 years, and put all the values from the same month together and checked where is the mean and where they are most probably located. So those values that are, let's say, below a certain threshold, this 95% confidence interval, then these values we considered as not being present. So when we applied this method, then let's say these abnormal values, for example, in 2015, this January and February, they got detected as being not present. So from visual perspective, it worked better for us. And also under this MOPA project, one master thesis by Ivari Laaksonen was made that used both mobile phone data and electricity data. And in that thesis, a correlation analysis also confirmed that this occupancy detection method that we had created worked the best. So when we're using this long-term occupancy detection method, we can actually calculate how many properties then are occupied throughout the years. So again, a clear seasonal pattern appears so that we have more properties occupied during the summer months and less in winter months. And when we put it into a relative scale, then during summer months, the occupancy is more than 80% of the properties, while during the autumn and even in winter, it is really lower, being around 50%. And when we put it on a map, then again, we can see the differences. So as a good indication that, for example, in February on the left side, on the A figure, the occupancy levels are around or less than 60%. But again, July, as we all know, really popular holiday month, the occupancy rate is over 90% even. So this is what we can do using this occupancy. Taking a step further from this occupancy, we can actually, let's say, create some kind of patterns from this occupancy. So we give each month a meaning whether this property in that month was occupied or not. And we get these sequences, either being present during only 3 summer months or throughout the year and so on. And what we can do, or what we did, is then cluster those different sequence patterns. And what we came out of that actually in our database, in this free time residencies group, we have 3 main usage groups. So we have those permanent users or permanent use group that actually is there throughout the year. So the green color indicates being present at the property. So this constitutes the majority. Then 1/3 of the sample we have are actually, let's say, these classical summer use people who only come during, let's say, from May until September, and they are present there. And then the smaller share is then actually these really occasional users who come only from some months in some in some years, in some months. And when we now check into which clusters the occupied properties belong to, then it clearly indicates that these 2 methods work in line, that the permanent use group is throughout the year has a same share, and these summer use groups are being present during summer, and this occasional use actually still appears mostly during the summer months. So not much occasional use during winter. So what to conclude from this? Mobile phone data and electricity data is good source to understand second home living, and especially to understand the where and when questions, because it has both of these data sets have good spatial resolution and also really good temporal resolution. So it's up to date, and it's easy to analyze it as it is aggregated, it's already digital and easy to use. However, it is not a substitute to the traditional sources, because using this kind of information, we are not in contact with the people themselves. So we don't know the actual real reasons behind the visitation or their motivation or what they are actually doing there. So for answering these questions, we still need all kind of different traditional methods as has been done so far. But the key should be the combination of these data sources, so that these digital big data sources won't be only, let's say, in the servers of some commercial companies, but they could actually use for bigger societal benefit and for bigger societal good. Thank you. I had the thank you slide as well. And to all the co-authors who have been doing this work.
Thank you, Janika. This is most interesting, this electricity consumption data and using it. It opens up really new horizons for looking at the second home living and all which is connected with it. And now, ladies and gentlemen, you have the opportunity to ask Janika questions or comments. Nyt on tosiaan sit mahdollisuus vielä Janikalta kysyä, jos haluatte jotakin. Tämä oli tosi mielenkiintoista kuulla tästä sähkönkäyttödatan analysoimisesta. Siitä tulee ihan uusia näköaloja nyt tähän vapaa-ajan asumisen tutkimiseen. Ja siellä, joo, anna vaan sinne mikrofoni.
Okay, hey, I'm Silja Latvanen, I'm from Pertumaa. Very interesting presentation, but also a bit scary. And I am a bit skeptical as well into collecting data this way and how reliable it is. Because now you've been using electricity consumption and use of mobile phones. That is, of course, something that we cannot manipulate yet. But even our generation, especially the younger generation who is digitally more capable, they will be able to make themselves anonymous in Twitter and Instagram and other places. Is that kind of, do you see a problem in using that kind of data for this kind of surveys? Why I think it's a bit scary is that it is also used for commercial purposes and maybe purposes that we don't even know of. I don't know if I want to be followed where and when I go and what I do. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for pointing out. I deliberately did not talk anything about privacy or ethics, because there will be always a question about it, whether I talk about it or not. Of course, this is an important issue, and this has to be taken into account throughout the process. So actually, it is good that the people are anonymous, because we as researchers, we are not interested in any specific person. We would like to see the bigger trends. So what are the movement patterns? Where are the bigger flows going? So this information is aggregate in general. So in case of mobile phone data, this is provided by the Telia Crowd Insight that is basically already anonymized, it's already aggregated, and there are already the spatial units themselves are so big that it's not possible to identify any specific person from that. So all this data is in line with the European General Data Protection Regulation, or the GDPR. So this definitely has to be taken into account. And I think my personal opinion is that actually it is good that the companies are opening up this data for researchers, because so far for decades it was just for their company business management purposes, but now they are opening it up more for example, making official statistics or providing it for the researchers. And I do believe that actually, as we are part of it, we are creating this data, then we should have the right also that this data is used for social good. And if this is done in a social good way, or let's say, for example, by the statistical offices, then I can, as a citizen, I can be sure that this is done in a safe way, in a proper way, and it is not handed out to some random people somewhere. So definitely a topical issue, but I do think that the practices will become more open and more transparent so that we don't feel this intimidation towards it.
No niin, thank you. Oliko vielä muita kommentteja, kysymyksiä? Miltä siellä chatissa näyttää, Veera? Onko siellä? Joo, kyllä. Okay, there are no more questions. Thank you, Janika, very much for this very interesting presentation, and here is our thanks to you. Tosiaan sitten tuossa tänään julkistetussa raportissa on Janikan ja Ulle Järvin erittäin mielenkiintoinen artikkeli tästä aiheesta. Ja nyt on sitten ohjelma edennyt siihen vaiheeseen, että pidetään ihan pieni jaloittelutauko, semmoinen vajaa 10 minuuttia, ja jatketaan tässä salissa sitten ohjelmaa kello 10.35. Ihan pieni hengähdys- ja virkistystauko tähän väliin. 10.35 jatketaan. Kiitos.